Good morning, students. We come to the end of this chapter, and we have seen that India's freedom struggle was not without its own share of problems and differences among different sections of Indians as well. Because a land that is so full of complexities and so much about the diversity of India that we are already aware of, different sections had their different way of looking at the presence of Britishers. First you have to understand about the presence of Britishers, and only then they would be thinking about responding to whether to participate in the freedom struggle in the next place. Because the first thing, how you perceive the presence of an outsider, whether you consider him as an enemy or you consider him as your friend, and that was the whole crux of the problem, where different sections of Indian population saw them in a different manner, in different ways. There was a huge section of the ruling class which saw the British as friends, and not just the ruling class. In fact, you would be surprised to know, and if I was in class, I would have shown it to you on the board, that even the lower section of Indian population, not that everyone was against the Britishers, okay, though it's not there mentioned in this chapter in great detail. But yes, once the school reopens, I'll certainly share that piece of information as well. Now, and so that is why Congress used to have a huge amount of a challenge at hand to ensure that they could give a fight to the British as a people of a united India rather than a divided India. So it was never going to be an easy assignment for anyone who wished to see the end of British rule in India. And especially it was difficult under the times when different sections, whether the peasant class, the farmers, the industrialists, the Muslims, the Anglo Indians, everyone had a problem, and this problem was far more earlier. You have to understand that the differences in our the differences among the Indian population was the approach. I'm talking about the early years of freedom struggle. The difference was main about the approach, whether they should go for a violent struggle or whether they should go for a non-violent struggle, or a moderate one. Then it came about whether they would want to have a certain section of population wanted complete independence, certain section of population that is primarily led by the contrarians like Gangadhar Tilak and Sardar Bhagat Singh. These people wanted absolute independence from the British rule. But then there was a huge section of the freedom fighters who wanted some kind of 50 here, 50 there, and yes, some kind of a dominion status, some kind of a self-rule situation. They were okay about the British presence as well. So those were the areas of differences where we had differences in the approach to take to get rid of the British, and how much we wanted to see the end of British. So it was more or less, it was about behind the ideology and the philosophy behind it. But when the real time for struggle and the real when it gained momentum, and every section of Indian population in all different parts of the massive geography of India, when they started, when there was this thought, this belief had very firmly taken the root that yes, this was a time to get rid of the British. Then the problems started, especially after the World War, when it was very evident that yes, the British rule would be ending. It is just not just if it would end, it would be when it would end. So it was, they could see that the end of British rule in India was near, and that is when the differences started about the real, because then people started bringing up the issues which showed the pettiness in certain areas, and about then it became about me and my people, and what would happen if my people, what would happen if my people and me. Then it became a very very singular, and it became a very very group wise approach and ideology, rather than a very philosophical one. So that is where the challenge was, and Congress, with full credit to the Congress party of those times. Let me reaffirm here about they were more or less tremendously successful in bringing different sections of Indian population on one platform to fight the British. But one thing, students, this is a very important paragraph which we would like to quit India movement. Now, freedom struggle of India would be incomplete without mention of quit India movement. So let's see. The failure of the Cripps mission and the effect of Second World War created widespread discontentment in India. This led Gandhiji to launch a movement calling for complete withdrawal of the British from India. The Congress Working Committee, in its meeting in Wardha, that is in Maharashtra, on 14th of July 1942, passed the historic Quit India resolution demanding the immediate transfer of power to Indians and quit India. Now, students, what was Cripps mission and the failure of the Cripps mission? Now, Cripps, that is, his name was Sir Stafford Cripps. Now, Sir Stafford Cripps was the leader of the Labour Party of England, that is Great Britain. Now, Britain has two major political parties. One is the Conservative or the Tories, and the second one happens to be the Labour Party. And he was the head of Labour Party, because at that point in time, England was being ruled by the Conservative Party, that was headed by Sir Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of England then. And he had sent Sir Stafford Cripps to India to work out a deal, and because British found it extremely difficult, because they had an enormous amount of challenge in the form of Adolf Hitler to maintain their own territorial integrity. Even Britain, when it was the master of almost half of the world, was on the verge of losing its own independence in England. So Churchill was really, really worried, and he needed more soldiers. Now, in the First World War, they could do. Indians did not have a very full-fledged freedom struggle running. So, they could send as many number of Indian soldiers to different battlefields of Europe without taking Indians into confidence. But this time, they could not have done it, because the freedom struggle was in its full momentum, and they would have had to take the Congress party leaders and the Muslims and every section of Indian population into confidence. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to get resources. And that is why Sir Stafford Cripps was sent to India to really garner that support, but he was not able to, because there was so much of mistrust between the British and the Indians by then, around 19 as I said, after 1928 and after 1930, and especially after the civil disobedience movement around 1932s, that the British always felt that the Indians were hiding something, and they have a clandestine plan of their own. The Indians felt that the British were hiding something and not revealing the whole truth. So it was bound to fail. So Stafford Cripps, the Cripps mission in India failed, because so Stafford Cripps was promising that yes, because he came to India right in the middle of the Second World War, because Second World War, if you remember, started in 1939. So he came here right in the middle of Second World War, when England was fighting Second World War in Europe, and he wanted the Indians to support this whole cause, but the Indians wanted certain things in return, of course. Now the British were willing to give self rule to India at that point in time, and then they said that yes, okay, first we would give you self rule, and then we shall see about the independence of India. But then Indians felt that yes, the British could not be trusted on this. British could not be trusted on this, and they were only willing to give self rule. Now, self rule, I have always said, is just giving you certain sections of responsibility, but the major power, the major responsibility would have still lied with the British, like the power of defense, power of foreign affairs. All this would have still been with the British. So Indians didn't want that. So it was bound to fail, and it failed. And so Indians, the Congress Party did not believe that they would be giving independence, and there was no timelines. And the Muslims were also not in favor of this Stafford Cripps mission, because Stafford Cripps was not talking about Pakistan at all. He did not even mention Pakistan. So it appeared that the British government was still looking at India as a unified India, as an India which had no Pakistan. There was no division of India, and this was something which really disappointed the Muslims, and so naturally they also ejected out. They were not interested in supporting the British in the Second World War at all. So it was on this occasion that Gandhiji delivered the famous "Do or Die" speech. The call for quit India almost brought the state machinery to a standstill in large parts of the country, as people voluntarily threw themselves into the thick of the movement. People observed hartals, and demonstrations and processions were accompanied by national songs and slogans. The movement was truly a mass movement which brought about in its ambit thousands of ordinary people, namely students, workers, and peasants. It also saw the active participations of leaders, namely Jayaprakash Narayan, Arun Asif Ali, and Ram Manohar Loya, and many women such as Matangini Hazra in Bengal, Kanaktala Barua in Assam, and Ramadevi in Odisha. The British responded with much more force, yet it took more than a year to suppress the movement. Students, essentially, at this point of time, you have to understand by around 1940s, most of the Indian, the names that have been mentioned here, Jayaprakash Narayan, Naruna Asaf Ali, and Dr. Ram Manohar Loya, these were very very prominent names, and they were very young at this point in time. Okay, and the leadership of Congress, that is people like Sardar Patel and Pandit Nehru and Gandhiji, all of them were very old by then, right? So this was the second line and the new breed of Congress leadership that had been, and not exactly Congress leadership, but the leadership of the youth in India. Because Jayaprakash Narayan, he was always very very active. I think he died around 1979, 1980. Dr. Ram Manohar Loya, similarly, Arun Asif Ali, they became essentially very very prominent politicians in 1960s and in independent India, that is in 1960s and 1970s. So that's the reason why these names have been mentioned, students. So this is where this chapter ends. It doesn't actually take you till right till the 14th of August. Okay, and the 15th of August, 14th of August for Pakistan, and 15th of August for India. But yes, I'm sure once we assemble in class, I'll take it to the logical conclusion as well. Okay, thank you. So this chapter is ended. You shall be having assignments very shortly, and also the class test very shortly. So start working for these two chapters, that is nationalism in Europe, and of course India's freedom struggle. You would be having tests for both these chapters very shortly.